Hi guys, Olive here today with my fall book haul. I will admit right up front that this is a little bit of a bigger haul. I've definitely been more excited about buying books because I've been going to used bookstores again. They've just started holding library book sales for the first time in a very long time. I just went to my first one in 18 months just a few weeks ago. And I've been very excited about shopping for books in the way that I love to shop for books. I love used books. I love going to those book sales and finding the hidden treasures. So I probably did go a little bit overboard. Hunting for books brings me a lot of joy, and it's also my birthday in just a couple of days. So I guess I'll just consider all of these books birthday gifts to myself. There is both fiction and nonfiction within this book haul. Of course, it's a little bit heavier on the nonfiction, considering that's the kind of reader that I am. And also because I wanted to pay special attention to nonfiction. I wanted to highlight more nonfiction in this book haul because Nonfiction November is right around the corner. And I figure there are still some people out there who might be looking for some ideas of what they might like to read for Nonfiction November. So without any further ado, let's take a look at the books. So let's start off with some nonfiction that I think would appeal to anyone who's participating in Victober right now. If you don't know what Victober is, it is an annual event here on BookTube, much like Nonfiction November. But during the month of October, there is a focus on Victorian literature or things relating to the Victorian era. So for anyone participating who really loves Victober, it's a wonderful event. If you want to continue that reading into November and be focusing on nonfiction instead for Nonfiction November, I think a book like this would make the perfect choice. This book is called Inside the Victorian Home, A Portrait of Domestic Life in Victorian England by Judith Flanders. This book does exactly what the subtitle says. It talks about the realities of everyday life in Victorian England, which was actually a whole lot grittier than what period dramas like to portray. Another nonfiction book that I think would appeal to Victober participants is a book called The Pockets, A Hidden History of Women's Lives by Barbara Berman and Ariane Fenito. A tie-on pocket was a very necessary and apparently a very common accessory for women wearing dresses, especially in the 18th and 19th centuries. This book discusses what seems to be the precursor to the purse. It is a highly visual history, lots of great photographs in here. It seems like this is going to be beautiful and also very thorough. From fashion to art, I now have an art book I would like to show you. It is called Renoir's Dancer, The Secret History of Suzanne Valadon by Catherine Hewitt. This book is a biography of this woman right here, Suzanne Valadon, who in addition to posing for this beautiful, very famous Renoir painting, was also a talented artist herself. I love reading about art, the art world, the people within it, and I really want to learn more about this painting, especially because it was featured on Gilmore Girls. So now I have a number of different food books that I would like to show you. I chose these specifically to show off in this autumn book haul because I associate this season very strongly with food, because it's the harvest season and also because American Thanksgiving happens in November of every single year. So let me start off by showing you two different food memoirs. The first one is called Burn the Place by Ileana Reagan. This book is the story of a self-taught chef who grew up on a small family farm in Indiana, went through a lot of struggles, but made it through and eventually ended up running a Michelin-starred restaurant in Chicago. And the other food memoir that I picked up is one that I bought pretty much exclusively because I saw Sabrina over at Bookish Sabrina raving about this one. It's called Our Lady of Perpetual Hunger by Lisa Donovan. This book was written by a very successful chef. She's helped set up restaurants across the American South. She's a trailblazer of a pastry chef. And in this book, she tells her own story, but also her family's story, particularly stories of the women within her family. I'm going to link Sabrina's review in the description box below and up in the cards if you'd like to hear more about this one. That is what convinced me to pick this one up, so it might do the same for you. And speaking of women in food, I also picked up a copy of What She Ate, 6 Remarkable Women and the Food That Tells Their Stories by Laura Shapiro. This book contains mini biographies of 6 different women who had something to do with the food world in one way or another. Some of them have more famous names, others are lesser known, but all of them sounded absolutely fascinating. The next food book that I wanted to show you is actually one that I got in a Bookish subscription box. That that book is called The Sugar Season, A Year in the Life of Maple Syrup and One Family's Quest for the Sweetest Harvest by Douglas Wynot. This book is all about maple syrup producers and the industry at large. Apparently some really wild things happen within this industry that you would never have thought of. This would be a really good pick for our industry prompt if you are interested in reading this for Nonfiction November. I got this as a part of the Read It and Eat subscription box that is curated by BookTube's very own Kim from Bookmarks and Breadsticks. If you missed the video of me unboxing all of the maple-themed goodies that she included with this book, I'll link that video for you in the description box below and up in the cards. Next, I got Secrets of Saffron, The Vagabond Life of the World's Most Seductive Spice by Pat Willard. This book tells the story of the rare and also extremely expensive spice that we know as saffron. I barely ever use saffron in my dishes because it is so expensive and so hard to come by, but I am so intrigued to learn more about it. Maybe after I read this book, it will encourage me to try using it. Next up, I have another nonfiction book about a very expensive ingredient. This book is called The Truffle Underground, a tale of mayhem, mystery, and manipulation in the shadowy market of the world's most expensive fungus by Ryan Jacobs. This is a book about truffles, which is a type of mushroom. It's a fungus, and I've been loving reading about mushrooms so far this year, but I do think the books that I've read so far on mushrooms are going to seem downright tame in comparison to this book. Truffles are extremely rare, and therefore they're very expensive. They're very sought after. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that there's illicit activity surrounding truffles because they command such a high price. I think this book is going to be a little bit of a food book, but also kind of true crimey. It seems like it's going to be a wild ride, and I can't wait to read it. I was kindly sent this next one by the publisher. This book is called Sisterhood of the Enchanted Forest, Sustenance, Wisdom, and Awakening in Finland's Karelia by Naomi Moriyama and William Doyle. This book seems to be part nature writing and part memoir. The author of this book, Naomi Moriyama, William Doyle is her co-writer. She moved to the Finnish side of Karelia, which is a region that apparently helped inspire Tolkien's Middle-earth. And while she was living there, she connected with the natural world, she connected with the nature of the region, but also she connected with a very empowered group of women who lived there. I was really excited to receive this book, not just because it sounds like exactly my kind of thing. Nature writing plus memoir, I mean, that's the recipe to win my heart, basically. But also because it hits very close to home. I've actually been to the Russian side of Karelia, and it's one of the most beautiful, peaceful places I've ever been in my entire life. So I'm really excited to get to learn more about the other side of Karelia that I didn't get to visit. And also I wanted to show you this book's beautiful end papers. Next up, I have an enormous book to show you. And normally I would say enormous meaning the page count, the length of it, but no, in this case, I mean the actual length of it. This is the Explorer's Botanical Notebook. This book tells the stories of all these different explorers who traveled across the world to find different types of plant life, collect it, record it, use it for study, bring it back home. So on each different page, there's the story of a different explorer, and also it includes a reproduction or sometimes several reproductions of the actual specimens that they brought home. You get a little map of where they went to collect these specimens. This book just seems like a treasure trove. Now, this next book would be a really good choice for anyone looking for a Nonfiction November Indigathon crossover kind of book. This book is called As Long as Grass Grows, The Indigenous Fight for Environmental Justice from Colonization to Standing Rock by Dina Gilio-Whitaker. This is a history of Indigenous resistance to the government encroaching on their land and also their fight for environmental justice. Next up, I have a piece of classic nonfiction. This is The Diary of Samuel Pepys. Last year during Nonfiction November, I made a whole video about classic works of nonfiction, and this book was featured on that list. This book is an abridgment of the day-to-day life account of a man living in Restoration England, and I especially want to read this one because Helene Hanff, author of 84 Charing Cross Road, she raves about this book in 84 Charing Cross Road, which is one of my all-time favorite works of nonfiction. So ever since I heard her talking about it in that book, I knew I needed to read it. And speaking of Helene Hanff, I was so excited to find this next book. It's one of her books, and I found it when I was shopping at a used bookstore. This is Q's Legacy. And from what I understand, this book is both a prequel and a sequel to 84 Charing Cross Road. This book tells the story of how Helene Hanff came to fall in love with English literature. She read this book of lectures by this man named Sir Arthur Quiller Couch. She fell in love with that collection and wanted to read everything he recommended, but she couldn't find all of those works in New York City, hence why she started up the correspondence with the bookstore located on 84 Charing Cross Road in London. And eventually, when she does go to London, this is the sequel part of this book, she goes to visit his study and talks more about him as a person, I think, because he had a really big influence on her life as a reader. I am so excited to read this. I want to read everything she ever wrote, so I'm very happy to have my hands on a good, clean copy. But since we're on the topic of literature, I also picked up a copy of South Toward Home, Travels in Southern Literature by Margaret Eby. This book seems to be part travelogue and part literary history. This author travels across the American South in search of a reason, if there is one, why the American South has produced such great literature. One of the authors discussed in that last book, South Toward Home, is Flannery O'Connor, and I just so happened to also pick up a biography of Flannery O'Connor recently. It's called Flannery, A Life of Flannery O'Connor by Brad Gooch. I don't know much about Flannery O'Connor. The only thing I really know about her is that she kept peacocks, or peafowl if we're using the correct term. I would actually like to read some of her work. I might actually like to pick up some of her work alongside this biography, because I already know I like biographies of literary figures, but I have no idea where to start with her work. So if you have any recommendations, please let me know in the comments. Next up, I have even more literature that I need to get around to reading. This book is The Annotated Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. I have really been wanting to read some of Virginia Woolf's fiction. The only thing I've read of hers is A Room of One's Own. I thought it was terrific, but that's technically nonfiction. I have never known where to start with her fiction, but recently when I was out book shopping with the lovely Katie from Effusions of Wit, who is now back on BookTube, I am very excited to report. We were walking around the bookstore and I asked her where she thought I should start with Virginia Woolf, and she said Mrs. Dalloway would be a really good place to start, and that bookstore just so happened to have this beautiful new annotated edition of Mrs. Dalloway, so I decided to go ahead and pick this up. It also has a new introduction by Merve Emre, and I have to admit I wasn't a big fan of her book on the history of the Myers-Briggs test. I thought it was not great, actually, but I could love her introduction here. You never know. And with a book this beautiful, it's hard to feel anything but positive. The next book I was also inspired to purchase because of another booktuber. The lovely Jill from The Book Bully talked me into buying Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. This book is a multi-generational family saga. We follow 4 different generations of a Korean family living in Japan. I am sure you've heard all about this book. You've either read it, you might know someone who's read it. It was a sensation in the literary world a few years back, and I completely missed the boat on this one, but hopefully I can correct that here soon. Next up, I have 2 Lily King novels, both of which I acquired as part of my ongoing effort to read through her entire back catalog. So first up, I actually have her debut novel called The Pleasing Hour. This book is about an American au pair living with a family aboard their houseboat in Paris. And I also got her second novel called The English Teacher, which is all about an English teacher, single mother who's keeping a secret from her 15-year-old son. I really love Lily King. I'm actually going to be writing a review of her new short story collection for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm going to be getting started on that here very shortly, but I also want to read her older work as well. I think she's just such an accomplished author, so I'm looking forward to having read all of her books, and I think I own all of them now. But now I have a couple of campus novels that I would like to show you, and the first one is called A Doubter's Almanac by Ethan Cannon. I actually picked this book up because one of you recommended it to me in my comment section section quite a while ago, I think, but thank you very much for the recommendation. This book apparently spans 7 decades, but everything starts off when the main character attends UC Berkeley, so it's kind of a campus novel and then some. This next book I found at the library book sale that I was speaking about at the beginning of this video, and I was originally on the fence about whether or not I wanted to read this book. I had heard some really good things, but then some also really mixed things. So I wasn't sure I wanted to read it, but it was only $1 at the library sale, and for $1, I can at least give it a try. It's The Maidens by Alex Michaelides. This book apparently contains a murderous professor, a secret society of female students, an overly curious group therapist. It really sounds like something I would like, but I've just never been able to figure out how I would feel about it because of all the different reviews. But if you think I'll like this one, let me know. Next up, I have 2 books that were actually gifted to me by the amazing Emma over at the Overstuffed Shelf. The first book she sent me is called Lives of a Cell, Notes of a Biology Watcher by Lewis Thomas. And apparently this is a very lyrical essay collection that focuses on biology, of course. The second book she sent me is another essay collection, which is so perfect because, in case you don't know this about Emma, which if you're not watching her content, you absolutely need to be. She's incredible. But essay collections, they're her favorite subgenre of nonfiction. So I thought it was just so perfect that she sent me 2 essay collections. But the second book she sent me is called They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us by Hanif Abdurraqib. From what I've been reading about this book, it seems like all of these essays are about music, but within each of them, he also talks about his feelings about current events and culture as well. It sounds incredible. Both of the books that Emma sent me sound absolutely fantastic. Thank you again, Emma, for sending these to me. I was not expecting it, and it was just such a lovely surprise. Now, since we're still in spooky season, I do have some darker books to show you, some darker pieces of nonfiction. The first one is called Bitten: The Secret History of Lyme Disease and Biological Weapons by Chris Newby. This book looks at Lyme disease as an illness, but it also discusses the really wild claims that the epidemic that infects 300,000 Americans annually might be the result of a government experiment gone wrong. Next up, I have a darker memoir to show you. It's called The Undertaker's Daughter by Kate Mayfield. The author of this book is the daughter of an undertaker, and she basically grew up in a funeral home beginning in the 1950s in the segregated South. I also picked up a used copy of Corpses, Coffins, and Crypts, A History of Burial by Penny Coleman. This book is exactly what it sounds like. It's a history of burial, how different cultures bury their dead, what various grave markings mean, things of that nature. There are a lot of black and white photos inside of here, which I won't show you in case that's not your kind of thing. But I think this book will appeal to fans of Caitlin Doughty, just like myself. More dark nonfiction, I also picked up a copy of In the Land of Long Fingernails, A Gravedigger in the Age of Aquarius by Charles Wilkins. This book is a memoir, and in it the author tells his story of working as a gravedigger in Toronto for 5 months during the summer of 1969. And the last dark piece of nonfiction I have to show you in this haul is a book called Dark Archives by Megan Rosenblum. This book was written by a librarian, and in this book she discusses the historical practice of binding books in human skin. Creepy. The last 3 books I have left to show you in this haul are 3 different sports books, 3 different books on football, and this first one was actually sent to me by the publisher. It's called Year of the Rocket by Paul Woods. This is the story of how, in 1991, hockey star Wayne Gretzky and actor John Candy, in addition to, I think, one other person, they purchased a team within the floundering Canadian Football League, and then they signed an American college football star, Notre Dame star Rocket Ismail, to play for the team. It sounds like a really wild story, and I can't wait to read it. I also picked up a work of sports history called The Game: Harvard, Yale, and America in 1968 by George Hal Colts. This book is, of course, about the Harvard-Yale game in 1968, the football game between the 2 rival teams, but it also seems like it's going to be about a lot more than that. It talks about what was going on in the country, in America during 1968. It was a very tumultuous year, events-wise, and also it talks a lot about the Vietnam War that was going on at the time. So from what I've read about this book, it seems like it's very thorough, but also highly readable. And the last book in this haul is called League of Denial, The NFL, Concussions, and the Battle for Truth by Mark Finaru Wada and Steve Finaru. This book is about the National Football League, the NFL, and their attempt to cover up the fact that, yes, the numerous concussions that players sustain while they are playing the game of American football do indeed cause irreparable brain damage. It's the reason why I have a lot of mixed feelings about American football. I think the game needs to be made safer. I've done a lot of reading on CTE, and I have very strong feelings about it. So I'm very interested to learn more about how the NFL has attempted to cover it up over the years. So on that light note, those are all of the more autumnal books that I've picked up recently that I wanted to show you in today's haul. If you've read any of these books, if you've heard of them, or if you'd now like to read them after seeing them in this video, you can of course let me know in the comment section below. Any other comments or questions you may have can go there as well. But if you would like to keep up with what I'm reading and writing about right now, you can find me on various places around the internet, including social media. I'm on Goodreads and Instagram and some other places. The links to all of my profiles will be at the bottom of the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you're having a wonderful day. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.